Welcome to Golf Training Hacks, and part 2 in our series on creating effortless power. Now in part 1 we talked about lag, and how when you effectively create lag, you're actually storing elastic energy in your tendons, and that helps produce speed and power in the golf swing, or any athletic activity. It's just like pulling a rubber band apart. You're storing the elastic energy, let it go, it snaps back, and the energy is released very quickly. So it's really important in the golf swing to be able to store elastic energy. And in part 1, we talked about that. So if you haven't seen part 1, check it out. We talk about that in more depth, and there are also some exercises in part 1 that will help you with that. But just quickly, to summarize part 1, you need separation from your hips, between your hips and shoulders in the golf swing. That's going to create the tension, or the building up the tension in your tendons to create that elastic energy storage. So you want separation in your hips and shoulders in the golf swing. Now, the term lag means trailing behind, right? So your hands and your shoulders trail behind your hips in the downswing. And that's going to create and store elastic energy. But what we didn't talk about in part 1 is how that energy is released. There's a couple of ways you can release that rubber band. So if you pull the rubber band apart and you let it go quickly, it snaps back quickly and the energy is released quickly. If you pull the rubber band apart, we have the same amount of energy storage, but if you go back very slowly, the energy is released very slowly, and it's not a very quick or powerful movement. So how do we release energy quickly in a sports movement, or in this case in the golf swing? Well, luckily for us, excuse me, the neuromuscular system has that sorted out for us. There are sensors in your muscles that are always looking for a rapid stretch, because a rapid stretch could potentially injure soft tissue and joints. So when that sensory system perceives a rapid stretch, it sends a signal to the spinal cord that something's happening and it's not good. The spinal cord sends a signal back to the muscle to contract, right? So a rapid stretch, a signal goes to the spinal cord. Reflexively, the muscle contracts and stops the stretch. It's a reflex action. Now that action has a name. It's called the stretch reflex. And we can harness the stretch reflex in sports to create more power and speed. Now you can think about it like this. When someone is jumping and they make a counter movement, so if you were to start here and then just jump up, you wouldn't be able to get very high. But when you make a counter movement and move up, that's how you can increase the amount of distance in your jump. That's because when you make a counter movement, the muscles in your leg go on a rapid stretch, and that signaling system, the stretch reflex, occurs. We get a reflexive response from the spinal cord to stop that stretch, and then we get a power boost, and you can jump higher. So it's important that that happens quickly, because if you didn't do that, if you were going to try to jump high and went down to a quarter squat, and stayed there for, let's say, 5 seconds and then jumped up, well, that wouldn't be a very powerful jump. You wouldn't get very high. You're burning a lot of energy by hanging out in that squat. It has to be quick. So in the golf swing, if we put it in golf swing terms, when you're in your backswing and your hips lead the way and you get that quick rapid stretch, the stretch reflex occurs and your muscles, so to speak, or your tendons snap back, and you can begin to get that powerful swing. You can think of this a lot like sprinting. So if we have a 100-meter race and the sprinters are in the blocks, the power or the effort to generate force out of the blocks is relatively slow. I mean, it happens very quickly for a high-level sprinter, but that effort is more muscular, right? They're really driving and forcing and building up power. Now, when they get to top-end speed, that's all reflexive. That's basically just bouncing off the ground, and the tendons are releasing energy very quickly. Well, you can think of your golf swing like that. Your takeaway and the movement into your backswing could be like coming out of the blocks. There's some muscular effort. But the downswing should be like top end speed, and that foot hitting the ground quickly, and that tendon mechanism just releasing energy very quickly. So here's what I mean. So we have that sprinter analogy, right? Coming out of the blocks, it's a slower movement. It's really driving the feet into the ground. Although it happens very quickly, in relative terms, it's a lot slower movement than top end speed when the feet are hitting the ground and we have a rapid response, a ground reactive response where those tendons are just propelling the sprinter down the track. I mean, you couldn't forcefully run at top end speed by using a lot of muscle contraction. It should be reactive. So in the golf swing, when we're taking the club away, it's more muscular, right? There's no reactive force here. We're drawing the club back into our backswing. Now, as we begin to enter our downswing, so there's an isometric contraction at some point, and your hip is moving forward while your shoulders are staying back. That's the storage of energy in your muscular system, in your torso. And then it snaps back just like a runner running at top end speed as the foot hits the ground. If you don't have this separation, you never have that top end speed reaction. That's what happens when you're using a lot of rear side force to force the club, push the club into impact. So one way is top end speed. So you come into your backswing, you've got a strong isometric contraction, the hip moves forward, this stays back, and then you have that stretch reflex reaction where you begin to come into impact. Conversely, you have very little separation here, and you're coming back in one motion in the same plane, and you're using your shoulder, your muscular force to get that club back to impact. And that's not what you want to do. You're leaking energy, you're leaking power when you're using too much muscular effort into your downswing. And we also talked about casting. If you are releasing your energy out here instead of at the ball, then you have an energy leak too, and you're burning up energy out here. So in the worst case, you have no separation in your hips and shoulders. You come back to impact with no separation. So there's very little elastic energy storage, and you've casted. So you have these two planes working together. At this point, you think you're trying to create speed, but you're really not. That club casts, all the speed is burned up here, there's no elastic energy stored, and you're pushing the club into impact, and you're losing a lot of power and speed. So in the next video, we'll talk more about creating some strength in your upper body, some isometric strength, and we'll do some more advanced exercises in part 3. So if you found this helpful, we'd love you to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up, because we want to get our message out to as many people as possible about improving movement quality. So tell all your golfer friends, and you know what? It's not just really for golfers. A lot of people can benefit from improving their movement quality. So thanks for watching.